Okay, good morning everybody and welcome to our calendar and prompts webinar. So the session's going to last about 20 minutes with time for questions at the end. If you can ask any questions through the chat for me, please. And any questions that we don't have time to answer, we will be recording the session so we can send out an email for you with the recording so that you can have that available at the end. And also we'll answer any questions that we haven't answered during the session. And we'll email those with a copy of the webinar recording for you. So today we're looking at calendars and prompts, and your calendars are controlling the opening times of lines, and your prompts can give specific messages in different situations. And you can add modes onto the calendars to create events, which can then be linked to your prompts. And that's what we're going to be looking at today. So through this session, we're going to be looking at accessing your calendars, creating new calendars, adding events to the calendars, and then adding prompts into your flows. So you can access calendars through the user console, service delivery console, or configuration console, all accessed through our single sign-on login page. So we're going to look at each one of those in turn, and we'll start with the user console. So if you navigate to the user console, in order to access the calendars, you'll need to be a supervisor and then click on the menu option, which are the three lines just next to your initials. That will then give you a menu where you can move to your other consoles very quickly and easily through the menu here. And you can also go into the settings. On your settings as a supervisor, you'll have an option for calendars, and you can then select the calendars that you want to see at the top of your user console. I'd recommend that you have the main calendar on there. Obviously, that will control the main opening of your practice telephone line. Once you've selected the calendars, they'll then be visible up by our Surgery Connect logo up at the top left-hand corner of the screen. It will tell you the calendar and it will tell you what event is on that calendar at the moment. So I can switch these events using the preset modes. So any modes that are already on the calendar, I can swap from the user console here just by clicking on where it says open. That will then take me into an overview of the calendar. I can't make any changes from here, but I can click on view calendar and that will take me through to the calendar. If I wanted to change the event that's currently on, if I click on turn off auto here, that will then allow me to switch between the preset modes that I already have on my calendar. So I can move it to an emergency situation very quickly, just by clicking on emergency. It will then ask which type of override we would like to enable. So a permanent override is going to do this until midnight, and the next calendar event may be interrupted by any events that you have on your calendar. So I'd recommend that you use the permanent option. That way it's on until you turn it off. When I click on permanent, it will change the status of my calendar straight away. And that's then notified within the user console up at the top there. If I want to change that back and put it back onto the normal calendar to reopen the phone lines, I can click on the emergency and that will then open it up and I can turn auto back on, which will then put it back onto the normal scheduled activity. If I want to manage the calendars a little bit more, if you've got access to the service delivery console, you can also manage your calendars from there. So if you navigate to the service delivery console, you can use the menu to go from console to console. I can then click on my calendars menu up at the top, which will then bring up the calendars that I have available for the practice. So I can create new modes here. So if I have new events that I want to create messages for, I can create a new mode for the calendar to create a new event. And when I click on the new mode, it will bring up a pop-up where I can give it a name, I can create the color, and then it will show it in the list with my other modes. I can also create calendars here to restrict opening times for particular groups. So if we needed a new calendar with different opening times here, then I could create a new calendar. When I click on add new calendar, that will then bring up a pop-up where I can give that calendar a name. So in this case, I'm going to use test results, and my opening times for that line will only be from 10 until 2. So I can set those opening times quickly and easily here when using the service delivery console. When I click on Save Calendar, that will then bring that new calendar up onto the screen for me. So I've now got my test results calendar with opening times of 10 till 2. I can edit those opening times using the blue pen, and I can view that calendar by clicking on the calendar icon at the end of the row. That will then open up the calendar for you, so we can see that it's automatically inserted the opening times from 10 till 2 that I wanted. And because we've done this in the service delivery console, it's also added our public bank holidays automatically. So any bank holidays then would automatically show in your calendar. You can then drag modes from the side here over onto the calendar to create specific events. So if you needed to close this line for training, you could drag training over and bring that over onto your calendar and set an event. If you ever need to delete an event, just be aware of recurring events. So your bank holidays, if added automatically, are a recurring event. So if you needed to open on a particular bank holiday, rather than have the bank holiday message going out, you would need to delete the instance of that holiday. If you do that through the user console, it will delete all instances of that event. So if you only need to delete one event, you're much better doing that through the configuration console. So that's what we're going to do now. So to access your calendars in the configuration console, you're going to navigate to the configuration console, and then in the menu on the left-hand side, we need to select calendars. That will then bring up the calendars that we have available for the practice. And as before, we can create a new calendar here. And we can also delete any calendars that we no longer have in use for the practice here, just so that you can keep your calendars up to date. If I click on the Create Calendar, that will then take me through to a box where I can set the details for the calendar. So I can give that calendar a name. I would set the default mode as closed, and then we can add in your opening times as events on the calendar. You can also copy existing hours from existing calendars. So if this at the moment has the same opening times as another calendar, you could copy those opening times over. Once you've created the calendar, it will be a blank calendar like this one here, and we can now use the modes to create different events. Rather than dragging them over singly and creating single events each day, if you want to do a recurring event, you can use the new event button up at the top, and you can use the public bank holidays here to add on all the bank holidays. So if this is a calendar that's controlling a main incoming number, you could make sure that that line is closed on bank holidays by changing this to yes, and then selecting the holiday mode here. If I click on new event, I can then add recurring events. So I could add in my opening times. So when I click on new event, that will then take me into the event manager options, where I can then set the opening times for my line. I can assign the mode, so that's going to be open. I can then also set the repetition and also the frequency of when this line is open. So I want this one to repeat. I want it to repeat every week, and I want it to be on Monday to Friday. So I'm doing Monday to Fridays and closing at the weekends. I can also set a start and end date for this calendar if I need to. And then when I click on save, that will then save those hours that I've put onto the calendar, onto your calendar on the screen. So we have our test results calendar here that we've now got our 10 till 2 opening times and closed on bank holidays. So I've added the public bank holidays in here. Now that we have a new calendar with events that we can add on to it, I can now add a mode switch into your flow so that the lines can be checked for opening times if someone dials that number. I could also add this into an existing menu. So if I had a test results option already, I could just add this calendar in to check the line's opening times. If you need to edit a calendar in Configuration Console, you can use the pre-populated modes here to bring events down onto the calendar, and you can drag those down and they will be single events. If you want to create recurring events, you're going to use the new event up at the top. If you have events that aren't available in our pre-populated list, then you can create new modes using the plus just at the top of the mode here. That would then give you the option of having a different message. So we could create perhaps an external training option. And if I click on the plus, I can then give that a name. So I've made it external training. I can pick the color. I can even pick the icon for my group that will be displayed next to the writing on the calendar. When I save that, it will then ask me to give that new mode a priority. So it will give me my list of modes that I already have, and they're in a priority order. So the priority shows how they will lie on your calendar. So obviously beneath everything is your close times, then we have your opening times, and then any other of these will go in priority order. So if there's an emergency situation, you drag the emergency on, or you change it to emergency from user console, that will override everything else until you switch that off because it's the highest priority. So you can move the priority of these here. You can also change what you've done so far using the edit pen. So I've realized that actually external training is quite close to the open color time. So I could change that color just by clicking on edit, and it will take me back to my mode creation screen. Once I've changed the color, I can then save it. And when you save it, it will then appear in the list of modes in the priority order that you've given it. So I now have a new external training mode here. If you want to delete a recurring event, as I said, you're much better doing that in the configuration console. So when you come into your calendar, you'll have your event. And if you click on the event, it will ask you if you want to edit that. If you click on the edit button, it will then take you into the event itself. And we then have our recurring events information here. So this is a recurring event that happens every week, Monday to Friday. You can use the delete button down at the bottom here to delete an event. And when you click on the delete button through the configuration console, that will then give you an option to either delete the single event by using the confirm button, or you can delete all instances by deleting all. So if you only wanted to delete that one instance of a bank holiday, then you can use the confirm button to delete just that one instance. We then need to use a flow to put those prompts into the system. So we need to tell the system what to say. You can access the Xflow if you have access to Xflow through either the configuration console down at the bottom of the menu here, from the menus at the top of the service delivery console. So you would access that through the numbers and then linking through the icon to get to your Xflow, or you can go through the single sign-on window and use the Xflow link there. Once you're in Xflow, if you've accessed any way other than through the numbers in the service delivery console, you'll need to load up the flow. So you'll have a load icon just at the top here. When you click on load, it will then give you a list of the call flows that you can use. So I've selected the main number call flow here. I could also search under telephone numbers if it was a particular number that I was looking for rather than the call flow. When I click on load, that will then load up the call flow onto my screen for that particular line. So any of the icons down the left-hand side here, I can then drag and drop onto my desktop to create new prompts if I'm using the prompt option here. But first of all, I need to add my mode here to my calendar, because my main calendar lookup on the mode switch on my Xflow doesn't at the moment have my external training on here. So to add that prompt, I'm going to click on the main calendar, double click into the main calendar. That will then open up the mode switch properties, and I can click on the visible outputs tab, which will then take me through to the options that I have coming out of that mode switch here. When you go into the visible outputs, It will have a tick in each one that we already have selected, and you can see my new external training here doesn't have an output. So all I need to do is pop a tick in the box and then click on save, and that will then give me my new external training as an output for this main calendar. I can now create a prompt that will tell the patient different information when we have this external training as an event on my calendar. So I can drag the prompt from the right-hand side, drag it over onto the desktop, and then I can double click on the prompt box to customize what I want the prompt to say. On the first tab of your prompt box, you're going to have the name. So you could change the name so that you can identify this prompt easily when you're looking at your call flow. You can even give it a description so people know why you're using that particular event. The can interrupt down at the bottom will determine whether the patient can press any button and skip this message. So if it's important information, keep it as no. On the audio tab, I can then pop in what I want the system to say. So you can either use text to speech or you can upload your own audio file. You can select the voice that you want the prompt to be read out in, and then obviously you can pop in the text if you're using text to speech of what you want that to say, making sure that any numbers that you want to give out are set as characters rather than the full number. If you preview down at the bottom, just to make sure that that text has been read out correctly, and then you can use pauses and say as to make sure that it's saying exactly as you want it to. So we've got external training here. We've got our external training prompt. All I need to do now on my Xflow is to join the dots. So I'll take the dot from the external training down to my prompt, and that will then create a link for that particular process. I can then use auto arrange once I've got those linked, so that it spreads it out on the screen a little bit easier, so it's easier for me to read. Remember that any changes you make don't go directly onto your main number. So if you have a test number, you can now call that as a patient to see what that call flow sounds like. What you might need to do is to actually force that onto the test though. So just at the top here, you'll have a test override, which you can select the specific outcome for that main calendar there, and it will highlight it when you've got it selected. If you don't have Xflow in your configuration console menu, then you'd need to use the prompt section to add the prompts for the new event. So on your configuration console menu, rather than the Xflow, you'll have menus and prompts. So if you go into the prompts and create a new prompt there, that will allow you then to create the prompt for that particular calendar event. And then you'll need to go back to your calendar through your configuration console menu here. And then on your calendars, you'll also have a mode switch on the calendar itself. So you can then click on the mode switch there and allocate what prompt you want for your new calendar action. So for that new mode, and also what action you want that to complete. Now, if you want more information on doing that solely through the configuration console, just email training@exon.co.uk and we can do a separate session just on creating the prompts and menu options through the configuration console. So we've had a look at accessing the calendars. I've been asked to summarize what different options are available depending on how you access the calendars. So if you access the calendar through the user console, you can only change to existing modes that you have set up already. You can create new calendars and new modes if you have access to the service delivery console, but calendars automatically have recurring appointments in. And if you're deleting recurring appointments, you really need to do that through the configuration console. So the configuration console gives you full access. You can add new calendars, you can delete old calendars, you can add new modes, so you can create new events, and you can delete recurring appointments, and you can just delete the single event rather than all of the recurring events. We've also looked at creating new calendars. So we can do that through the service delivery or the configuration console, adding events, which we can do either through the service delivery or the configuration console, and adding prompts, which you would do either through your Xflow or through the prompts menu in the configuration console. So if anybody has any questions, I did have a question about changing the priority order. So when you are creating an event in the service delivery console, it will ask you to assign that priority. And it will be a screen where you can move that up and down the screen just by dragging it up and down the screen there.